The Fujifilm X-T4. Let's get into it. Now, I've been using Fujifilm cameras for quite a long time. I had the X Pro 1, the X70, the X-T30, the XS10 and the X-T4. Of everything, only the X-T4 remains. I didn't expect to only keep the X-T4, but it's a camera that never lets me down. Now, it's not the smallest Fujifilm camera, and size is one of the big reasons that I actually got into this system, but it's not a hefty beast either. It is a little bit bigger than the Fujifilm X-T3, but standing next to the X-T30, the X-T4 is not a massive unit, and it does have some advantages that I wish more cameras had. I'm not going to bore you guys with the same specs that you can find anywhere on the internet. I'm going to tell you the bits that are important to me, and everything else we'll put into the side. Now, what's important to me? That stupid flippy screen that I can look at to monitor myself, I really like it. I really like it, and I know a lot of people prefer the two-way tilt and everything like that. I just don't use them. On my X-T30, for example, that had a similar two-way tilt mechanism. I didn't use it. But this silly flippy screen, I use it all the time. The 26 megapixel sensor on this is perfect for me. It's big enough that I can deliver great client work, it's big enough that I can crop in a little bit if I need to, and it's perfect for printing. Another benefit to me is the EVF on this camera. I absolutely adore it. This EVF is one of my favourite EVFs of all time. It's huge, it's bright, it's got a fast refresh rate, and it's a high enough resolution that I can know that my image is sharp in the viewfinder. What other specs on this camera do I particularly like? Well, I do actually like the grip on this camera. Now, I know that's controversial because some people just don't get on with the XT line grips, but for me, I find the X-T4 extremely comfortable and very filling in the hand, and I've got big ass monkey hands, so that helps me. Another thing I like about this camera is the weather sealing. This, as a native British man, is very, very useful for me. I have taken this camera out in some horrendous conditions and it always performs. I've had it literally dripping with rain, water pouring off this thing, and it just keeps on going. Something that gives me more confidence than any previous Fujifilm camera I've used. And now that I've had a weather sealed camera, I'm not saying you need it, but for me, for my use case, it does help. So for me, the weather sealing is a very important thing and something that I'm very glad to see on this camera body. Another feature that I find particularly useful on this is the IBIS. Now, it's not the best IBIS in the world, and for video specs, it's okay, it's not the best, but it will get the job done, and when it comes to photo, you can get some ridiculously sharp images handheld at 1/15th of a second. That is extremely useful, and a lot of my professional work is shot in places that are not very well lit. Again, I don't think IBIS is the be-all and end-all of photography, especially for someone like me where 90% of the lenses that I use are actually fast primes, even when I'm on a work shoot. But it is a nice thing to have, and it does allow me to get a little bit more clarity in my images. So it is a useful feature to me. Another benefit to me is the redundancy in camera. Now, I know a lot of people would love to have a small hard drive in the camera and then a memory card that they can just use separately, but this camera has dual card slots, and I treat that second card slot as my redundancy drive. So everything is backed up to it, and I don't even have to think about it. That gives me a lot of peace of mind. Again, especially on a work shoot, I don't even have to consider that I might lose my images due to a card failure, which can happen. It's not the most common thing, but I have had a card failure in my career. Touch wood, only a single one, but it's happened. So having that dual card slot, that is essential for my main working body. Another thing I want to touch on is the dial layout. Now, for me, this camera is the perfect balance. It has a nice D-pad, it still has a joystick for navigating your autofocus points, and it's got ISO, shutter speed, exposure compensation, and your focus mode switch on the camera. This is fantastic. The other thing is, a lot of these buttons can actually be remapped to be custom functions. I use this feature on any cameras that have it, and I love tinkering with this setting and really making a camera feel like my own. Now at this point you've already seen a lot of images in this video and there's plenty more to come, but you can see the image quality of this camera is absolutely fantastic. Now for video it does shoot 4K 60, but for my work I shoot 4K 24 because I'm just doing talking head stuff. Now if you go and have a look at my last few videos shot on this channel, they've been shot on the X-T4 and I love the results. There's a lot of settings that you can do on there, and I do find the video options overwhelming, but that's because I'm a novice in this realm. I am a stills first photographer. Video, I'm learning to incorporate it, but I am not the best. But the X-T4 does allow me that room for growth, so I have got access to 10-bit colour, HDR footage, 4K 60 footage, and some slow motion settings as well. For video, this is a very well-spec'd camera. Two more important features about the X-T4. That battery life is ridiculous, absolutely insane. I only have 2 batteries and I have done long working shoots with this thing and never been able to drain them both. It's hard enough to drain a single battery on the X-T4, and that for me is one of the biggest step ups over the X-T3. Don't get me wrong, the X-T3 is a fantastic camera, but this battery life is ridiculous. It's ludicrous how much of a difference it makes. And the other point is this is a well-built camera. It is a hefty beast. Now again, it's not a massive camera, but the build quality feels absolutely phenomenal. The only parts that I'm going to mark it down on, and I am going to mark it down on points, is that the silver paint job, which looks cool, is a pretty weak finish and it's very easy to scratch. Now that doesn't bother me because I buy my cameras to use and abuse them, but for some people that like to keep them on the shelf and never take a picture with them and just take pictures of their cameras, I can see this being a problem. The other thing is I don't actually like the doors that you can put the mic jack and the USB charging in, for example. It's quite a loose flap on the side and I just don't like that. I prefer a solid door mechanism that opens and closes rather than a flap style system. Other things I don't like, well, let's be honest, sometimes it's still too big. It's a small camera for the amount of features, but sometimes it is just a bit big, just a bit. And I have actually got another camera that has not been shown on this channel yet that I use as my current daily carry, and that's the camera that comes with me on all my little adventures and stuff like this. I still like to take the X-T4 out from time to time, and I did just take it on its second trip to Wales, but sometimes it's a little bit big. And when I went to Rome, I didn't fancy carrying it around because of the size. Now, the other negative that you may come across is that it's an APS-C camera. This is actually a benefit for me, and let me discuss that. I have a full frame camera. Again, it's not appeared on the channel yet. Get subscribed so you don't miss that content. But when I'm doing paid work, I want to be as close to my subject as I can without being too close to my subject. And again, as I said before, I don't really like to use zoom lenses. So if I'm using an APS-C size sensor and I'm using my, let's say, a 35mm 1.4, that is a closer equivalent of a 50mm lens on a full frame sensor. So for me, I am using the benefits of APS-C to get a little closer to my subject. Now there are obviously the other arguments that you're going to lose some subject separation, and that it's not going to be as bright or as fast. But for the most part, again, I'm using f1.4 glass or I'm using f1.8 glass, so I just don't seem to have these issues, and my clients have never complained about the work. So is it a problem? Yes. But is it also a benefit? Yes. You've got to look at the whole rounded picture here. And that brings us on to the next topic. Is there anything that I would change about the Fujifilm X-T4? And the truth be told, there is. For me, I would change the accessory door flaps. I would also like to see it to be slightly smaller. Now my X-T30 was more of the size that I actually prefer in a camera body, even though it's a little cramped on my ape hands, but I do need my weather sealing and I do like my redundancy. Again, this is a working photographer's perspective. Outside of that, I would like to see the finish improved, a little bit more resistant. This was Fujifilm's flagship camera for quite some time, but overall, this camera's been an absolute blessing to use. I feel like this is where Fujifilm finally started to catch up to the rest of the pack in terms of autofocus as well. Now, yes, it's still not a Sony, but it's plenty good enough. And again, I'm talking about paid work here, but I'm also talking about my personal work too. Does it like low light? No, of course it doesn't. It's not the best, but it's definitely far from the worst, and it's more than usable. Now tell me, what about yourselves? Do you have any experience with Fujifilm cameras? What about the X-T line of cameras? What would you change? Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed the images, I hope you enjoyed my breakdown on the video, and I'm sorry there's not too much footage of the camera here, because I'm using it to shoot this video. And one last side note, I'm on 1,396 subscribers now. That's absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for everyone that's joined me on this journey. And thank you to the over 72,000 people that watched my X-T30 video. Alright, don't forget to subscribe so you make sure you don't miss out on that full frame camera review. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.